another episode of the Currency Club. Today's special guest is Dre, aka Super Dre, aka Super Drizzy, one of my favorite female entrepreneurs out of Michigan. So I invited Dre here today because she is dibbling and dabbling in a lot of different things. She is a creative, she's in the tech industry.
Thank you so much for having me. But I've been a musician for a long time I wasn't a musician since I was 4, but I've been playing music since I was about 4 years old. And, sort of did that all the way through school and everything, and then ended up getting into tech later on when I was in college, and sort of found a way to make all of those things work together, basically.
So did you start out as a DJ or did you start out as a musician?
I made music before I ever DJed. I really didn't start DJing until a little bit later, after I had already sort of been doing some composition work and stuff in high school, through college. I just didn't know what I was doing exactly. I was making music that I liked, but I was making house music. I was legit making Detroit techno and Chicago house. But I was young, so I didn't realize that I was doing that. I didn't realize there was a name for it. And then people were like, oh, you should play this out. And so that's actually when I learned how to DJ. It was I had already been making my own music, but then I needed to perform it just like any other performer does.
So I'm looking at Dre's Instagram. She is the CEO of OPNR Music, producer / DJ, founder of Fourtifeye, and then co-owner of Motu Viget. Let's talk about the brands a little bit.
Yeah, actually, I'll start with Fourtifeye just because it's kind of the precursor, to OPNR. So I founded Fourtifeye in 2018. Fourtifeye, when we first started, was really a music tech platform that used data and really was the main focus was trying to help independent musicians. So independent musicians, you already have access to all of this data. So stuff that's coming from all your social platforms, your distributor, consumption platforms like Spotify, Bandcamp, Apple Music, all those things. All of those things serve up analytics to you. And most musicians either A, have no idea that they serve up analytics to them, or B, even if they do know, it's they might understand it in the context of one platform, but trying to understand it across multiple platforms is very different. So for instance, if you just, if you have an artist page and you look on Facebook and you can look at, the stats of that page. So you'll find stuff basic demographics of people who follow you, breakdown by gender, maybe where they live, other interests. So things like that. So that tells you a lot about, who's into you on that platform. But what it doesn't really tell you, but are they into you on other platforms? And, where do they live? How often, are they consuming the product that you're putting out? Things like that. So the idea was originally basically to take all of those data sources and be able to make sense out of them for the musicians so they don't have to be a data scientist. So we started that in 2018. I can't even describe what 2018 and 2019 were still recovering from that. I ended up getting accepted to a startup accelerator in 2019 that Motown and Capitol Records did. And that was fantastic because it gave me a chance to get the product itself in front of people, which was amazing. And we were good to go, ready for 2020, just like everybody else was, till we weren't. When we started in 2020, we had a lot of plans. We had partnerships with about 15 music festivals across the country. We were really hyped. And then COVID happened. So we kind of had to regroup and rethink about what we were doing, why we were doing it, if we should still be doing it. Because suddenly musicians had just a totally different set of problems because now they're broke. They're not making any money because there are no shows. Fast forward really a year later, at the beginning of the year last year, I wasn't really sure what was going to happen. I had actually thought about taking the platform that I built and maybe applying it to a different industry because I'm well, it's a data platform. You can pretty much turn it on to anything. It doesn't have to be the music industry. That's just what I'm into. Happened to run into Ted Veely from Michigan House here, which they kind of work along with South by Southwest. And I happened to run into him randomly one day. I hadn't seen him in 2 years because everybody had been at home because of COVID. And he was like, hey, he's like, I was just talking to this guy, you know, from Detroit that I know. And he's got, you know, this music tech company, but he's thinking about stepping away and doing something else. But the company is doing okay. He doesn't want it to die. He's like, I feel like I should like get a meeting with you too. So we did. and we chatted. And after some months and some lawyers and lots of conversations and signing papers, it ended up that Opener, which is the company that he founded, actually ended up acquiring Fourtifeye last summer. And then I was appointed CEO of Opener. So that's kind of how that whole thing like transpired in like really just a matter of like last year. So yeah, most of my work really the last 6 months has been getting up to speed on what was, you know, with Opener, sort of retaking a new inventory of what was for Fourtifeye, figuring out how to marry those two things together, figuring out how to get operations from Detroit to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and, you know, get things solidified so we're ready to start raising money. So.
You said a lot. There are so many different directions we can go with this. This is good. This is exactly what I wanted. You talked about the importance of networking, which we've talked about in other shows, and having conversations with people, but also you did the work on the front end and had this kind of initial skill set, and then you were able to partner and then eventually merger with another company. What skill set does a person need to get into this data and metric space to be able to even do what you were doing with Fourtifeye?
So I do not have a computer science degree. I studied music in school and business. And so I really didn't learn like some of like the technology skills and like learning how to code and all that stuff. Like I learned that on my first job, like after I graduated from Grand Valley. Go Lakers. Yeah, I figured that out like on my first job. And really that, like I was 19 years old when I graduated from Grand Valley. So I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like, I need to probably get a job and enroll in grad school because I'm not ready to be out in the world for real. I learned the skills for how to apply technology. So you kind of need like this mix of, it's like, yes, having the skills to code or to, you know, or to understand like how to like engineer data and stuff like that. Like that's important. What really what's important is like being like a subject matter expert on whatever it is that you're doing. Cause like you have like a dope data scientist who like can just like do all the analysis in the world, build you dashboards. Like if you don't have like the context for understanding like why, you know, this number is high this week, but it was low last week, you know, maybe it's because every year in the music industry around a specific time, this happens. And so therefore, like, you're just not gonna get certain traction from certain, like you would only know that if you know the industry. So it's like you kind of need like a little bit of both. Like I feel like it's kind of nice to have like some light level skills to really understand like how to work with the data. So if it's not you working with it, maybe it's somebody else, but like understand enough so that you know what needs to happen. But then like really, I think the main piece is to understand like why things are happening and how they're happening. In that context, like you're only going to get if you know that space.
Okay, so you mentioned a meeting and a conversation and a partnership with Ted from Michigan House, which led to you becoming eventually the CEO of Opener. Talk to me about partnerships. How do you form partnerships with influential people and people in the space where you desire to be?
Lesson number one, never burn a bridge. like I look back now and I'm like, I'm just so glad that I was always like nice to people, to everybody. There's been so many people who like I might have known from when I was like 20, you know, and now I'm like, oh shoot, like I need some funding to like get me from like here to here. Like, okay, who can ask? Like you call people, ask them. Somebody always comes through like for certain things. So like keep all your relationships good. But I think like the other piece is like a lot of times most of the people you're networking with, it's gonna be your peers, and like a lot of them are gonna be your friends. You know, just like you and I built skills, you know, over the last decade, like our friends have been doing the same thing, or we hope that. It should be that, you know, as you're growing and like learning stuff, your friends should be doing the same thing. You know, let's say I do marketing and like at the same time, my friend over here is really good with data. And this friend is like really good with being a connector. This friend might work at a venture capital fund. Like that's like, that's like an ideal scenario where just in general, the people in your circle are like the ones like who might be able to like make or break or make a connection or whatever for you And other stuff is just being willing to meet people. Like, I used to think it was ridiculous to say yeah all the time. And I do think sometimes it probably gets me in some trouble. I'll be mad at myself later. But I think of all the times I said yes to certain things that it definitely pushed me out far outside of my comfort zone. But doing it also put me in opportunities like where I would suddenly have access to new opportunities or new people or whatever all of a sudden that I just wouldn't have had before if I had said no or was scared to do it. So I'm always like, I'll just say yeah before I think about how scared I am to do it, because then I overthink it too much.
All right, so let's talk about opener. I called it OPNR, and I said, "How do you pronounce
Everybody
this?"
does.
And Dre's like, "It's opener," and I'm like, "Oh, that makes perfect sense." So I checked out your website, and on the homepage of opener, it says "Buy local, sell local, connecting musicians with local performance opportunities and local concert organizers with musicians' local fan base."
It's a cloud-based application that is kind of like this connection point between musicians and concert organizers. So if there are opening performance opportunities, which there always are whenever this can go anywhere from if it's a tour that's being booked at an arenas all the way to, small 200-person venue who just is booking singer-songwriters, for the night. But primarily, opener is sort of like that handshake between those two audiences, but uses technology to do it, to enable it, just makes it a lot faster, way more efficient. Yeah, we've been in business since, like I said earlier, since 2018. I took over just last year in 2021. And really just kind of restarting everything. I almost said post-COVID, but we are very much swimming in COVID right now. Post-shutdown of COVID, just kind of like, getting stuff reignited. Because I know everybody has heard about or experienced like the music industry and what happened like when, COVID first arrived on the scene in March 2020. Basically everything came to a screeching halt. For mainstream musicians, which the really, really rich ones, basically, that's like 0.25% of the industry. Like, it's really like there's not that many of those people. Like, when you're talking about like people who are selling out arena shows, like regardless of genre, whether it's like a Lady Gaga or Rihanna or Beyonce or Adele, like Foo Fighters, like those are acts that are so large that, they're selling out arenas. That's a completely different thing. And for the most part, those people don't really need help. And they didn't really need help during COVID either, because they had other ways of being able to monetize things like really quickly. So it ends up being like much like everything else, where it's like if you have a lot of money, it's a lot easier to use that money to parlay it into different opportunities. But that doesn't work so well for really the vast majority of the music industry, which are the people who are filling those venues that are like, 300-400 person venues in little towns, like all across the country. Like, that's actually the music industry, but just a lot of people don't realize that, because it looks like, what happens like, in LA, like in Hollywood, that's like really the music industry. And it's like, that's where a lot of the business takes place. But the reality is like that kind of like bedrock of the music industry is those little tiny venues and people showing up to little bars and stuff and just playing live music.
Do you cover all of Michigan? East side of the state?
Yeah,
West side of the state?
Yep. So Opener's national. So we actually have musicians and concert organizers, whether it's concert organizers, venues, all that. They're kind of all fit into the sort of the same category, people who buy shows. But yeah, we've got both audiences signed up all across the country. Obviously, we have a pretty decent concentration in Michigan just because we're based here.
Wow.
And trying to build that this year. That's my thing, is building that, increasing that, hopefully doubling that this year. So.
Yes. So do you have a team of people helping you with this behind the scenes?
I wish I did. I do not have a team yet.
It's just you?
So right now it's me, and I've got one person who kind of helps me like contract wise with like marketing stuff like PR, social. And then outside of that, this is where that networking piece comes in, and your friends and your family, like where they help you. That's 100% what's happening right now. Like there's, this is the phase that, this is the non-sexy phase that no one likes to talk about. This is the phase before you get your funding. This is the phase before you're on Instagram talking about it every 5 minutes. Like this is the hard part, where you're literally making something out of nothing. Everything over the last 6 to 8 months has been purely off of the strength of like relationships that I already had. I do not have money that we're funneling into this right now. So we have figured out, sort of how to just do stuff on like a shoestring budget, trading services and stuff. These are the moments like where I'm just really grateful. One, that I never burned any bridges, but also just like the fact that people have been willing to be there, even if it's little stuff here and there, it helps. Whether it's somebody like, helping me to like project manage, like running a show, or like right now I have like a couple friends who are helping me because we just signed an agreement with a festival, with a music festival down in Florida. So like I have some friends like kind of helping me with little things on those. So I'm like, all right, I can't pay you guys yet, but if you could just help me do this stuff for now, I can get you free tickets. I can do this, I can do that. So there's like, you can always come up with ways, to trade things and, to make something like worth people's while, but it's the relationships for sure. Because I'm tapping all of them right now.
Talk to me more about the unsexy behind the scenes stuff that you're doing to build up this platform.
I was just actually explaining this to someone the other day, because entrepreneurship is like hype right now. Like everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, and like I respect that. Like there definitely are a lot of advantages to it. But sure, there's advantages having a job too. So there's, either way, it's a trade-off depending on what it is. But like, entrepreneurship is like such a weird and isolating journey sometimes, because there's so much going on all the time and it's so fast, and like you don't really have a lot of time to slow down, which means you don't have a lot of time to explain a lot of stuff to people. And sometimes you probably need to talk things through with people, but it's hard because no one is going to care about what you're doing like you do. So like in our heads, 99% of the time, it's like occupying mental space, just like thinking about the business. It becomes larger than life. It's all you can think about. It consumes all your thoughts. It's the first thing you wake up when you go up. It's the last thing, you think about before you go to sleep. Like it just is isolating, because when you are talking to somebody about it, they care, but like kinda. And like their caring has an expiration on it, because like they listen, and then after a while it's like, okay, like we're tired of hearing about that, now. And so you sit with your own thoughts a lot, whether it be the positive ones or the negative ones. And yeah, sometimes it can just feel really lonely. So like that to me is like where whoever's on your team, that's where like those people become really crucial, because sometimes they might be the only people who care about this thing like that you made like you do, because other people just aren't going to care like that. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's not their concern. And the rest of it it's the time. And for sure, like, because the older you get, the less time you have, because then family stuff starts happening. The parents are getting older. You got siblings that are getting older, which means you might have nieces and nephews, and stuff is happening. People are graduating. There's just things like going on. So it's like you're constantly carving out time, and there'll be stuff that you want to do. You just have to look on sometimes with a little tear in your eye, because you're like, dang, like I can't do that. Like when your friends are going places on the weekend, sometimes you're like, shoot, like I can't do that. Like I really need to stay home and finish this PowerPoint presentation for this investor. Like, so it's just stuff like that. It's just a lot of sacrifice. And it can be hard, like when you see everybody else having a good time and you have to like remind yourself, like, no, it's like, it's delayed gratification. Like, it's cool. It's just the endpoint is out there. I just got to focus on that.
So what are the startup costs to create something like this?
For Fourtifeye, since I could build that stuff myself, I didn't really need money until it came time for like some marketing stuff. I self-funded like a little bit, but you try to put like a cap on that, because like you need your own money. You want to use other people's money who have so much of it that like it doesn't really matter to them if they have access to it right now. They only care if they have access to it 10 years from now when it's hopefully doubled or tripled. That's the money you want to use, not your $20,000 is in your personal bank account, because you need that. Like, tons of free money out there, and you just have to go after all of it, which is hard because going after it is time consuming. It's kind of like, if you're working for somebody and like you want a new job, but the mental switching costs of searching for that new job and doing a new resume and being annoyed every time one of them asks for a cover letter or some extra stuff, and you're just like, huh.
Filling out those applications, repeating on the application the same stuff that's on my resume. And it's like, why do I need to fill out this application with 5 different work experiences when you can just look at my resume? Why doesn't your system just import that data? Yes,
But yeah, and it's really the same thing, like when it comes, like at least kind of like where I am with trying to get funding before it's time to go the VC route, so it's like you just need little bits here and there to kind of like just to get you through. And like I said, most stuff, like we've been very blessed in that we've been able to kind of like negotiate and barter stuff with people without having to go get cash all the time. But there are like plenty of grant programs and stuff like that. It's just they're time consuming. So it's like everything's a trade-off. So you're like, all right, if I'm going to take 5 hours today filling out all these applications, then that means that's 5 hours that I'm not spending, having meetings with venues, or whatever. So everything is constantly trading off time, resources. This is why it's so much easier, if you do have your own funding. So for Fourtifeye, I would say total over the course of like the first, couple years, I probably spent, like including like money that I won like from Start Garden, like a couple other places, probably like 45 grand. And none of that went to me. Like when people worry about like paying yourself, like don't even worry about it, because it ain't gonna happen for a long time. So yeah, like that stuff is really just was strictly used to like build out the platform and like for marketing and stuff like that, and travel. Like, because you're going to have to go places too. You're going to have to go places and meet with people and be in certain spaces in order to talk to the people that you need to talk to. And you need money to do that. The builds for Opener, quite a bit different. They had access to a lot more capital. The initial builds for that platform was about $500,000. And so I would say between the final build and today, because like there was, some work that we did like late last year, some like bug fixes and stuff like that. Like if you are really trying to build out like a solid technology platform that is like, they call like an MVP, like, so the testing thing to show whether or not something works, you're almost always, if you can't build it yourself, that means you're going to be farming it out. It's probably going to be about that. It's going to be somewhere between like, if it's really easy, if it's an easy build, maybe I would say at the cheapest, maybe 50, but there's nothing that you're going to need today that's probably only going to cost $50,000. Like it is much more likely to be at least over 100, and definitely probably somewhere between 250 and 500K. It's a lot. The journey is you either do it yourself or you pay somebody else to do it. Or you can partner. Sometimes like a founder, if they're not a technical founder, they might find a CTO, somebody who can join the founding team who can do the build and stuff. If they don't do that, you got to hire somebody to do it. And it's probably going to be about $250,000 to $500,000 to do that.
If not more. Okay. Yeah. And you said there is money available, but it's generally grants, and you of course have to take the time to apply for those. So it's a trade-off of time. Do you know off the top of your head some resources or grant programs that entrepreneurs can tap into? So
for all industries, doesn't matter like what the industry is, it could be anything from beauty to, consumer packaged goods, food products, technology products, manufacturing products, like whatever it is, there's a startup accelerator that exists for it. And it's kind of interesting, like because I've worked in corporate, and so I've been on both sides of the fence of like, on the startup side versus also like on the corporate side, and like how stuff works and how it happens. And like, I think that the startup accelerators are great when you already have an idea, you already have it reasonably well thought out. And there are different kinds of accelerators too. There are some that are super early stage, and there are some that are more for like people who kind of already have some stuff built and they just really need help with like taking it to market. But there's just such a variety of different kinds. Some of them are equity based, like where they might come to the table with $100,000 and they might take, a percentage of equity in your company. Like that's pretty common for the ones that are like the big ones, like Techstars, and suddenly I can't remember any of the other ones off the top of my head, but most of the equity-based ones are usually somewhere between 100 grand, maybe 250K in exchange for a portion of the company itself. And usually during the time period that the accelerator is going on, you get a ton of one-on-one coaching, lots of connections get made. You'll get like handshakes and real meetings with venture capital funds, private equity funds. They basically have a vested interest in making sure that whatever you came to the table with is going to be able to go to market. Then there are also like tons of grant programs. Grants are amazing because they are usually not equity based. And so they are not taking a percentage of your company. And not that it's bad if somebody does, it depends on the kind of company, where you are in the journey, how many people are on your team, what, the makeup of your company, how you structured it, how you set it up. Because I really don't think most people need venture capital funding. Most people just think it's like a cool thing to say. And so they get real excited about it. But I think a lot of people don't really need it. Because you only really need that kind of funding if you are trying to accelerate. So like you want venture capital funding when you already have something in market, it is working. The only problem you have is that you can't scale or you can't go fast enough. Like that is like the best position like for an entrepreneur and for a VC to be in, like where they're like, or all you need is $1 million to fulfill an order or to do X, Y, and Z, or to, get from 50,000 customers to 100,000 customers, and you can do it. All you need is the money really to close the loop to make that happen. Like that's like the ideal scenario for everyone to be in for venture capital funding. But a lot of people do just fine without it. If you can do it without it, that's like the holy grail. that means you grew it on your own. You probably are retaining all, if not the vast majority of ownership. So that means nobody telling you what to do, how to do it. Because the reality is like once you accept funding, you are accepting a person telling you what to do. It is going to happen because really that's when the clock starts. Like the moment you accept that cash, that's when you're on the hook for making sure that investment not only gets returned, but gets returned and then some. So yeah, I always tell people like just chill on that unless you know that you absolutely need it. And I think more times than not, people don't really need it yet. Like you only really need that if you're trying to go faster and you're ready to go fast.
So we talked a little bit about money, and you said how a lot of entrepreneurs do not get paid in the beginning. So with your platform, how would you get paid? Is it contracts between the artist and the venues?
Yeah.
Or
I myself, also the previous founder, and just in general that I'm really passionate about, like I don't feel like costs should ever be passed on to the musician. The musicians are usually the people without the money. They're not buying the concerts. They're not buying the tours. The concert organizer and the venue is buying the tours because they have the capital to do that. So the last thing you should be doing is charging, $100 for a musician to submit for an opportunity for a show. So really like how Opener, and right now, like just so everybody knows, Opener is 100% free 99 for anyone to sign up on. So if you are a musician or a concert organizer, right now, all I care is that people are on the platform, using it, stress testing it, because all that is learnings that go back into the pot. And then we can say like, okay, we need to do X, Y, and Z over the next 6 months to like close these gaps. So, but in the future, the business model for Opener has always really been around the opportunities posted. And so again, not passing that cost on to the musician. Instead, it's going to be on the concert organizer and promoter side. And so there is a piece of Opener that is a fantastic feature that we'll be building a lot more onto over the next year. It's the piece that I know is going to help me get that funding later. So there's a mechanism and a feature in the platform that's called fan claim. When an opportunity is posted, so let's say I am a music venue and I bought a tour bringing Summer Walker to Grand Rapids, and I need to find some opening acts. And now, so the real question would be like, well, why do I need to find opening acts? I can just pick one. You can, if you're throwing less than 50 shows a year, that's really easy to do. You probably have like a decent amount of contacts that you can just reach out to at any given time. Where it becomes a very real problem is not for those people. It becomes a problem when you are an actual promotions company who's throwing 500 shows a year. It becomes very difficult then to come up with appropriate opening acts when you are booking things across multiple genres. And you have to make sure that you have people on there, not only like appropriate for opening, but also the opening acts usually are the ones who are responsible for selling that last gap in the ticket sales. So like that last like 10 to 15% of tickets, usually that's the opener, like that's closing those. So because of that, like you definitely want them on there. So the idea is that when concert organizers post an opportunity, they would have a per fee, basically like a per fee submission, because by using fan claim, what they can do is sort of go back into the platform and actually reach out to our full database, which right now we've got about 7,500 musicians from across the country signed up. So it's like enough people where you can definitely understand, how people are behaving on the platform. Primarily, so they would pay this fee, and that would give them access to the database, which they can then, for those musicians who submitted, basically what you're saying is that those people, when they post a link, which they get an automatically generated link once they submit to that show, and they can put that link out on their socials. So whether it's like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, and that link basically allows their fan base to click that link and say, this person opens for the show. I'm basically it's almost like a pre-sale, like committing for a ticket. Concert promoters and organizers will tell you that they care about all these wonderful things and that they have all these like things that drive their heart, and they care about the integrity of the shows and the music and all of that. It all comes down to one thing. They care about ticket sales. They want every show to be a sold out show. And the reality is, like, getting the right opener on the show, like, guarantees that a lot more than anything else does, than any amount of marketing will. So yeah, so that's really the plan, is that when it comes down to it, those folks the concert organizer side will actually pay a fee, and that will allow them this extra access to a different piece of the platform, that fan claim piece of the platform, which will actually have a direct correlation to helping them sell tickets.
Most startups fail within the first 5 years. A lot of them don't make a profit for, a few years. When do you expect opener to start seeing a profit?
We will probably be raising money before we'll be revenue positive, which is not that uncommon. I was talking to one of my friends who works at a VC fund in Detroit. He was like, this is great. Ultimately what it all comes down to is like, we don't need you to make money today. It's like they need the business model to be sound and solid. Because in really what any of them will tell you is like, if the product is good, if the team is good, they will work with you to figure out how to make money. Like that is like if everything else is figured out and those pieces are in place, they will work with you to figure out the best way, for you to construct a business model to make cash. There's less things to worry about, I think, than a lot of people realize. Like, I think people get really worried about like, oh, well, what if I make this thing? It doesn't work right away. Like, there's plenty of people along the way that can help you figure out those pieces. The hard part is thugging it out when you have no money, thugging it out when you're tired, thugging it out like when stuff isn't going well, when things are breaking, when nothing's working, when the team is falling apart and people are leaving and want to do something else. Like, that's the hard part. That's the part that no VC fund wants to deal with. They don't want part of that drama. They want your situation to be stable. If you come to the table and say like, wow, I built this thing and 50,000 people signed up for it, that's all they need to hear, because that proves market demand. Then they can go back and reverse engineer stuff with you and be like, okay, now we need to pull in a team, people who can help you figure out how do we now make this entity a money generating entity? Because it's in their vested interest for you to succeed at that point. They win if you win. You win if they help you win. So your fates are kind of tied together.
So I want to switch and play a little game that I call I'm a Hustler. What is the craziest thing you've ever done for money?
So I grew up outside of South Haven, kind of really between South Haven and Saugatuck, kind of. I grew up on 15 acres. Okay. Yeah, but my first job was at a blueberry farm, which is super common in South Haven because blueberries are huge there. They're a huge blueberry producing region of the state and really of the country because of the lime and the soil by Lake Michigan. So most people don't know this whole part of Michigan, that whole West Coast is great for growing blueberries. And I spoke Spanish well enough that I could translate and stuff. Yeah, I didn't do the picking, but I would do so usually If it was like stuff in the field, like you go like pick the buckets up, like you'd be on these little things that come like a gator, but they're almost like little mini like pickup trucks. You could like put stuff in the back. So those, and then in the shed, I would sometimes work like on the sorting line. So like, this is what I tell people, wash your fruit. That was when I learned like how many hands like actually touch your fruit before it even gets to the store or even really in the package. Cause it's like, you got people in the field, they're usually the best berries are usually being picked by hand, like not so much by the machine. So like those are the ones that are the most expensive, the most intact. And those, they go down a conveyor belt of many, many people who are rolling their fingers over them, picking out the bad ones, throwing them out or whatever, because they use those for like juice and dye and like all kinds of other stuff. There's a lot of fingers on the fruit.
If you had to come up with a large sum of money, like $10,000 in 2 days, 48 hours, what would you do?
DJ.
DJ? Okay. How much do you charge for a DJ session?
Honestly, it really depends. Like an event for the city or something like that. That's really different than me DJing for Electric Forest. So like it could be all over the place, like truthfully. But like usually those like festival shows, like bigger shows and stuff like that. That's how I bought my place, with some DJing. So.
Oh wow, okay. Dre, do you still work in corporate America? Do you still have that full-time job?
Because I'm glad that you asked, because this is like very timely, because my last day is next Thursday.
What? Congratulations!
Yeah. I've always did double duty. To each their own, however they want to do it. Like some people like to rip the Band-Aid off and just quit their job and then go do the entrepreneurship thing. I really don't like struggling like that. I can do it. I just don't like to do it. And the older I get, the less I like to do that. And like, I don't really feel like you should have to do that when there's enough like programs and money and stuff out there to try to like do it in a way that just is less disruptive to your life. And this is no shade for the people who do want to do it like that. Like, cause I have tons of friends who like, I'm just going to quit my job, and like they had a good struggle story to tell. I'm not one of those people who felt like I needed the struggle story to tell. I'm fine with just having like a work story to tell. I'm okay with that. I feel like too many entrepreneurs liberally edit, aka lie, about the story of how you got started. Like, I have heard so many stories where I'm just like, and it's like people I know, so I'm just like, that is not what happened. Like, you 100% got $100,000 from your parents. That's how you got started. And you need to tell people that, because otherwise they start thinking like something is wrong with them, like why they're not where you are. Like, no, they're not where you are because you had help. And there's nothing wrong with getting the help. But like, you better be transparent about that help, because you're like, all you're doing is crippling people coming behind you. How did we start at the same time, but this person is just so much further along, or like this team is so much further along? Like, that's why. And like, it's really important for people to be real, to share what actually happened, to share when stuff really was hard, to share the times where your family was like, you need to get a job. Like those are important stories, like, I think, to share, because those help like the next like crew of folks coming behind us to be like, all right, I need to be realistic about it. Like, just because it worked for Tyler doesn't mean it's working for you, because you might not have the same circumstances as Tyler has, and that's okay. It's just like, you needed to go a different route. Like, you need different kinds of help, than what they might need. So, I just worked really hard. I worked 2 jobs. Like, no, you didn't. You worked at Subway for 1 summer, and then like, you didn't actually work 2 jobs while you started your business. Like, that's not what happened. So, yeah, I keep it real.